Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Particle Accelerator. I'm here today with Dr. Venkata. Doctor, I would love for you to just introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Venkata Duvvuri. I am a consultant at IBM, as well as I have my own startup on the side, which is founded 2 years ago, which is a research and a marketing lab, as well as I'm a professor in a couple of universities teaching as adjunct faculty. And I'm based out of Pleasanton, California.
So, the way I love to get to know people on the podcast, how did you make your first dollar as a human being? For me, it was a paper route. How did you make your first dollar?
Oh, that's an interesting story because my first dollar was at a university right here in US at UMass Amherst, where I was hired as a research assistant. Apparently, I didn't know what to do. The first year, it was pretty tough for me to learn the ways of being a research assistant, but that was my first dollars as research assistant almost now 27 years ago.
Wow, cool. And did you have a toy or hobby as a child that you think influenced what you do career wise today?
Yeah, I did have a technical acumen. I did a research project in my undergraduate in two places. One in Bombay, where I did a research project under a professor, Mr. Shivare, in aeronautical engineering. Apart from that, I had my own independent study of fuzzy logic, where I wrote a unsubmitted paper just for a deep dive into a new topic. These are the two passion, I would not say hobby, I explored. And my other hobbies primarily include I come from a middle class background, playing around with other kids in what we call societies back in Mumbai.
Cool. When you were a kid, did you do a lot of building, engineering, math? Was there anything like that? I know sometimes in Indian culture, they do more of the Acubus style mathematics. I noticed that they teach math different in India than they do in the US. Do you think any of that influenced your success today?
Yeah, it did. I practice Saxon Math, which is what my daughter also did currently. She's just finishing high school. And the Saxon Math from the British way of teaching math. And it's basically iterative and recursive and overlapping curriculum every year. That was pretty useful. And that helped me in high school as well.
So, is there a quote from a famous person that lives in your mind rent free? What's your favorite quote or maybe a guiding principle that has guided your life to date?
I would say the quote happens to be from Elon Musk. Elon Musk says, if every hardworking person become a billionaire, then every construction worker would be a billionaire. So he advocates to work smartly instead of just hard work.
Yeah, I love some of Elon Musk stuff exposed me. Some friends who study him more closely than I do pointed me to the first principles thinking pattern. When we're younger, we learn from our experiences. We touch the stove and it's hot, so then we learn to not touch the stove again. And so if we get burned, we change our behavior. But first principles is interesting. What you learned in the past doesn't necessarily mean that will happen in the future. You have to constantly receive new data to make new judgments about what could happen, not always assume that because it happened this way in the past, it's going to continue that way. More of an innovative style of thinking. I love that first principles thinking from Elon Musk and other really innovative leaders.
The other leader that's inspirational and like my mentor is Warren Buffett. He suggests not aggressively, but conservatively and moderately into diversified portfolio. He has been a big influence in my life.
So you have 5 AI papers and over 5 AI patents while also running Serious Mindshare Lab and serving on multiple company boards. How do you balance cutting edge research with practical business application?
Yeah, my research happens to be helping my business. We have a small lab to do marketing for small businesses using AI. We are talking about mom and pop stores every day, around the corner stores, which have not yet benefited from AI a lot, and taking it to them and studying their problem. As such, we have written two papers on such topics, two more in the works. And so, this way of researching is called applied research, and that helps both research community as well as developing some product around it.
Yeah. So tell me more about that because your background is so sophisticated. You know all about data modeling, machine learning, AI. I'm so curious. I think most entrepreneurs would think that there's not much of an opportunity in small business. So tell me more about how this research is impacting small businesses.
The biggest thing about small businesses are two things. They don't have money and they don't have time. If you solve for these, AI is best known to solve these two. You can save costs by using AI and you can save time using AI. One of the ways in which we address this small business marketing is by building applications which leverage AI to predict marketing outcomes using little to no data. With generative AI these days, the innovation is such that you can predict with little to no data because all the known existing universe has already been captured by generative AI foundational models. So we can make predictions for small businesses which rarely collect any data.
Yeah, that was almost reading my cue cards here because so many small businesses, they're watching the news. Everything is telling them I need to get involved in AI. It's going to help me save money and make time, just like you mentioned. But they may have such a small pattern of sales or not really have the data. Proponents for AI are all telling people you got to clean up your data, you got to have data availability. So is there any practical approach you could suggest to the small business solving that problem between little to no data with maximum impact?
Yeah, the term that is used in generative AI is zero shot learning, which means that prediction with no data. And also, there is lots of ways in which this can be addressed. Best practices is one way to address in such predictions with no data. So you generally predict on a rule of thumbs or experts' intuition or experts' knowledge base instead of mining their data. For example, the model that we built was based on email outcomes, click rates for emails and open rates. We predicted based on keywords used in those emails. Keywords are just expert knowledge base which is available in the public domains. It's not really any data of historical campaigns. We can predict for them based on keywords and best practices to see whether they are on target to make their emails more compelling. That applies across the board for small business marketing, especially if you are doing Instagram or Facebook ads, which is what these small businesses do. So these ads, the copy of these ads and the keywords used in them can influence their outcomes, and that's what we can tell them, or that's what the tools we develop internally to use in our services for them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We found through some of our own trial and error, I want to say research, but I would be exaggerating. We put together some content and realized that if we called that content an ebook, nobody would click on it. But if we called it a guide, then all of a sudden everybody would click on it. The only word we changed was here's your guide to fractional CTO advisory and why you should choose a fractional CTO versus here's an ebook around fractional CTO advisory. Everybody click on the guide, nobody click on the ebook. It was really a cool discovery that if you call it an ebook, people feel like they have to do work. If you call it a guide, it seems helpful. It sounds like your research is uncovering some of those,
Correct.
just some of those best practices around what words should you use and what words should you not use.
Exactly. Lots of these generative AI methods, zero shot methods, are based on such learning from experts, from intuition, from best practices. Even at the IBM where I work, we have something called Consulting Advantage, which is an AI platform developed to guide addressing clients' needs and giving them good responses to proposals. That's all driven by 160,000 plus proposals that were put together and the best practices that led to good outcomes. Those were mined, captured, and then used.
Leveraging some of that pre-existing work rather than trying to shard it with a fresh research set or a bunch of historical data. That makes a lot of sense because all of the previous research that's been exposed is available through generative AI. That's really interesting. Your research spans from colon cancer diagnostics to neuromarketing for small business. What's your framework for identifying which AI research areas have the most commercial potential?
Generally, I try to stick to small businesses and marketing and neuromarketing techniques. Neuromarketing is a technique where the attention of a consumer is exposed based on neuroscience and the brain's patterns of observations in the general world. These neuroscience techniques are captured, well documented, researched, and ultimately available in products. This has been used for various purposes, but I use it for small business marketing. For example, I talked about Instagram and Facebook and emails, but another big aspect of a small business is the storefronts. Storefronts everywhere, but how many of them are appealing? And that's something we study. For most small businesses, that's their only channel. In fact, they may not even do much other than just opening a store and putting a open board out there, and that's needs to be evaluated. We have low cost ways to evaluate that and tell them whether that storefront is of the right design, is of quality material, what stands out, does their brand come up, and things like that, based on neuromarketing techniques.
That's cool. Yeah. The advertising of presence. There's also things on how many customers can you fit in at any given time. I know restaurants struggle with that. Sometimes the restaurant is just frankly too small or the location is just not convenient. And then if you're not well known or visible from the road, then that's going to be an additional challenge.
Yeah.
You completed a doctorate in technology in 2004 while working at IBM. How has that formal research training changed your approach to solving business problems with AI?
Yeah, one big thing I discovered while doing my doctorate is the reason it takes 5 years is you somehow reset your brain and cultivate creativity and out of box thinking. And that takes a while for the brain to mature. It took me 5 years, but now I understand it's a gradual process. You keep looking at the problem and finding ways to expand upon new ways to solve it. Ultimately, your brain gets adjusted to this new way of thinking, and creativity and innovation comes out of it. At Purdue, where I graduated with my doctorate, they have a very nice curriculum on teaching research methods, foundation of data analysis, and the foundation of research, academic writing, all that stuff is well included in the curriculum, which led me to a good thesis and PhD thesis, and finally my doctorate.
Do you think that's changed the way that you approach business problems? What I'm trying to understand better is you have this sophisticated doctorate training, but yet you seem to have a real appreciation for the small business. Most people would not go there. So I love the value that you're adding to the small business. Has that sophisticated AI research and doctorate changed the way you approach small business?
Exactly. That's why I chose this problem. It's not a well researched problem. It's not interesting to big organizations. My lab is self funded. 85% of the market is small businesses, and nobody seems to be paying attention to their needs. That's because there's no money in it and they want everything for free. Even if you capture 1% of the 85% market, it's still a very big deal to have a commercial presence for a small organization like us. This out of box thinking of solving a new problem came out of my PhD program and that way of
Cool.
thinking.
And then meanwhile, at IBM, you work on billion-dollar proposals involving transformers, Gen AI agents. What's the biggest gap between AI capabilities of today and actual enterprise adoption?
Yeah, the gap is in terms of trust, security, accuracy, and there's fear and the technical skills. Everybody is bought into AI, but they don't know how to accomplish it. They don't know whether to trust it. And the governance aspect, how to keep it under control. These ancillary pieces actually add up a lot. This is the beyond the foundational models and solving the problem, these ancillary pieces have become a very big deal, which becomes a blocker for these organizations. And I dealt with a couple of big organizations that I interacted with in IPM. Primarily, my clients were the federal government and some big banks and things like that. So, this is what I found talking to these clients and giving them responses to their proposals.
Yeah. When you're talking about ancillary pieces, I don't want to incorrectly assume ancillary pieces to me tend to be in the action stage. I can feed data, rag the data, or add additional context to the data. I can use the data model or the LLM, and I can produce output, but I'm still finding taking the actions is rough. I see a gap there. What do you mean by ancillary pieces?
Yeah, taking the action is rough. So by rough, you mean, is it trustworthy? Is it secure? Is it solving the right problem? That is where some of these issues are. For example, we just had the government put together an AI bill or some kind of policies which says that we will let you free and do stuff so that we speed up innovation. So those are some of the ancillary pieces I'm talking of, the deregulation or the regulations and things like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also feel that early adopters will skip some of the narrowing governance QA controls, and they won't end up with small mistakes. They'll end up with very large, erroneous impacts. I think that over the next several months, even year, as people are early adopting without those things in place, then the news and the media is going to highlight all of those impacts, because the impacts won't be if a person makes a mistake or even a workforce makes a mistake, the impact is somewhat controlled. But when AI makes a mistake, it's going to be at scale. Hearing that you think there's some gaps around measure twice and cut once and people being somewhat reticent, because I think the people that aren't are going to feel the early adoption pain. And I think the pain's going to be quite large. What's your take on that as folks start to trailblaze into AI without those ancillary things in place?
Yeah, I would say that initial blockers are in the minds of the people. It may make one mistake. Right now, we scale up the impact, but that's not justified. The scaling up of the impact is primarily because of regulatory, government, and other issues. And that's something I feel is overdone. The impact technically will be quite less. For example, if a Tesla car crashes, whereas if a normal person, like my daughter actually just was in a accident situation just last week, and that is not amplified. We just accept it. That's part of the learning. So why not give Tesla car an opportunity or other cars an opportunity to learn?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. If we did turn an AI agent on the loose, that would be our business decision. It's not that the AI agent creating a bunch of errors happened independently of our control. We gave it too wide of a data set. We didn't test properly. We didn't observe it. And so we're still in control of the situation. And then you're saying there are just some things we make a big deal out of. As AI has errors, we're going to amplify those errors in much the same way. If a self-driving car crashes, then all self-driving cars are bad, when really all cars crash, the ones driven by humans and perhaps the ones also driven by the AI.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate your perspective. That's a really great perspective. And I agree that as we approach this topic of AI governance, we have to acknowledge our responsibility. In my firm, we're using AI to help us with coding, help us write things. I'm constantly saying to the team, whatever you take from AI and use, you're responsible for it. Never will we blame the AI, because it is a tool for us to use. And we need to maintain that responsibility, not blaming the ghost in the machine.
Exactly.
Yeah. You've worked across IBM, Oracle, NVIDIA, with major enterprises like American Express and the federal government. How do different organizations approach AI transformation? Are they thinking of it in different ways? Have you seen a framework or approach? And I'm especially interested in that dichotomy between the federal government, large enterprise, and then, of course, small business experience.
The high tech industry is the first adopter, and they go in for these advanced technologies and latest technologies right off the bat, especially here in Silicon Valley. They adopt very quickly. But the real challenges are in other spaces, the banking industry, the federal government. These are where the real big bang for the buck is, because high tech industry is already so optimized that the meat you get out of solving a problem is not that much. Whereas in places like banking, consulting, or maybe even the federal government, these can have a really large impact. For example, one of the projects I'm currently working on is automating the claim processing of a veteran's health claims. It is tremendous amount of manual work to find out whether a veteran's condition was aggravated by their service, and that can be done in seconds by an AI. That's where the bang for the buck is, because now you have saved several thousands of hours of a claim agent's work through automation. This is just one particular example in our federal government, which would have a very large impact. And in fact, our project was not even affected by Doge, primarily because this is what was Doge meant to protect. And that's what I believe. And so these are some large impact projects for AI in the banking industry too.
Yeah, I heard a stat the other day that there are still over 200,000 applications running off of AS400. Probably the federal government is a large claimer of many of those. So we're just doing things in that same old way because the underlying infrastructure is still very legacy. If it were a bridge or a road and we were to see that aging infrastructure, of course, we'd have some visible example of it. But really, the entire federal government is running off of very frail legacy technology. And so I imagine this is just the beginning of a fairly large federal government transition that needs to take place to adopt some of these new technologies. I think in many cases, they're still trying to adopt cloud and modern data frameworks, not even to mention AI and all the unstructured data that exists in the federal government.
Exactly. So there's a long way to go. And there are other industries too. Let's not forget these other industries of energy. I'm in the consulting, advising relationship with a company which is trying to make networks secure when setting up a network to transfer energy across the country. And right now, it seems that infrastructure is quite prone to attacks from miscreants, and there's ways to automate and solve for this using AI fairly easily, because this infrastructure is extremely large and spread all across the country. So I'm trying to give some advice how to approach the problem and solve this, and also do some proof of concept work with them. So there's lots and lots of such applications across the board to solve where AI can fit in.
What lessons did you learn about product development and platform dependencies? You mentioned that you had to deprecate the iOS version and move to mobile web in one of your ventures. What lessons have you learned about product development and platform dependencies?
Yeah, we developed a product almost 1.5 years ago, which was an iOS app and a self-service app, imagining that small businesses would download the app and start using it. But what we discovered was these businesses need hand-holding. They actually need a service for almost free. And instead of giving it out to them and say, do it yourself, we discovered that what they need is, okay, this we can help you with, and for this small fee. So now it became a game of not giving out the product, but giving out a service for less, which is now what our pivot of our company. So this whole learning happens to be when you go out in the market, try to talk to them, test out a product at MVP and see responses. It's a learning curve and it takes time. You might be able to do it off the bat for enterprises. If you're building an enterprise software, you can talk to executives and get an idea. But if you're doing business with a small business, even conversing with them is a problem. They might not even speak English,
Right.
all that stuff.
They just don't speak the same language in terms of technology, even spoken word. What patterns do you see in companies that are successfully innovating with AI and those that are struggling, or even just successfully innovating versus struggling?
Successfully innovating companies like IBM just rolled out the Consulting Advantage platform internally. The top down approach of pushing AI from the top helps. We have a sound leader at IBM. I mean, I spent 7 years at Oracle as well. The push comes from up and above, and that's where the adoption begins at lower level, because there's lots of inertia with every initiative, every project, every department to adopt new things and change and rip away and clean up their existing way of doing things. Unless it comes from the top, a mandate or policy, it doesn't happen quickly.
Yeah. And how do you see that show up in a small business? What are the small businesses that are innovating successfully and benefiting from this versus the ones that are struggling?
For a small business, there's only one or two proprietors, and they don't know what's right and wrong. They rely on advice and references from some trusted partner. In our case, we are trying to build that expertise, being a trusted partner to small businesses and then advise them and charge them a small fee to make them change. So there's no top-down approach there. The small businesses, these owners are a lot into running their small business and had a tremendous amount of other issues to deal with rather than AI or technology. Small businesses are really small. And in fact, I'm talking about mom and pop businesses. They don't really think about doubling their business. They're just thinking of retaining or adding 10%.
My business is a software development consultancy. And this is why we added the advisory segment, because we realized there's this $10 million to $100 million range where if you're going to use an outsourced firm to help you, many firms in the past had given you a team or some bodies, but you're responsible for the governance. The purchasing customer is responsible for the governance. Enterprises have that governance layer baked in. They know what's right and wrong, and they can take in advice or staffing and do what they will with it. But in that smaller business segment, we've really held on to our responsibility around governance and being the arbiter of best practices and standards, giving good counsel and presenting options to empower the business. When you come to me, you get an engineering culture, not just people. And so we manage the resources, we manage the team according to the client's direction. And many times the customers need help with the general direction. I've advised a lot of business owners that really need assistance in even understanding the P&L and how the P&L is working, and are COGS correct? And do you have an accurate gross margin calculation? Are you really managing a business or trying to survive? We even see that continuum even with SaaS founders, where at the early days, they're just trying to get the product there and talk to some users, and there's not really a go-to-market strategy. And so we're seeing that whole continuum, even across companies where digital is their core competency. I can imagine that even shows up more in brick and mortar, where they're producing the business, they're doing all the work too. And yeah, I feel the ones that are successful are the ones that are open to that. They're constantly learning and improving. And when you show them how to analyze their P&L, the next meeting, they've gone through their P&L, they've eliminated frivolous costs, and they're moving forward with the advice that you're giving them. Is that what you're finding as well?
Exactly. And that's sometimes I interact with even a dumbed down version of solopreneurs who are just hustling around. It's their day one or week one. They are in a totally different boat. But yeah, I've come across various entrepreneurs and small business owners as they move up the chain from $10,000 to 100,000 to 500,000. That's the market I play with. Their needs and understanding for P&L and all this become better, and they need assistance with your company or my company.
Great. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for new AI companies in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think it's all application. There are so many applications of AI across the board and so many innovations possible. That's apart from the foundational and fundamental AI, which has already been revolutionized. I would say 70% of the tool set is already ready, and it's just optimizing them even further. But now, taking that 70% and building on top of it to address specific problems is where I think the next 3 to 5 years could be well spent.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would love to share that you haven't shared already? I just want to give you the floor for a second. If there's anything that you'd like to share that you haven't shared so far.
No, I think AI is a good area for the next generation to be in. And especially AI, I'm talking about generative AI and other new technologies that might come about. But that doesn't replace the human mind. The human mind is capable of much more. We are just using 1 to 2 to 4% of our brain. We can leverage 100% or maybe 70%. And that could change the whole game of who is on the top, AI or human. I feel human is always on the top. We have to structure our ways in such a way that humans are on the top. Because an AI can't graduate to the divine level, but a human can.
That's right. I totally agree. I think there's still this craving for emotional connectedness that I don't think we'll get much support on from AI. We might get more emotional sentiment, I'm seeing that in LinkedIn and email marketing. We're just at the beginning here. I think business and commerce is going to be about relationship. And as digital messaging and agentic stuff starts to flood our senses through digital tools, I think there's just going to be even more demand for personal conversations like this, good, solid handshakes. Those kinds of things are still going to play into our future.
Yep.
So if people liked what you've had to say today, how would you like them to connect with you?
Yeah, they can email me. If you search my name, you can find me. I teach at Northeastern or UC Santa Cruz or San Jose State. My email is venkata@seriousmindshare.com. This is my lab where we are trying to innovate for small businesses in the marketing realm as well as do research. You can also drop an email at contact@seriousmindshare.com. And I'm glad to help and mentor people.
Who specifically do you just love talking to? Would you love to connect with?
I love connecting with students and youngsters, especially those who are starting out, and I like to help them to get to the next level. I had a struggle when I was a youngster, and I feel it will serve me right if I correct that lacking of what I had when I started my career by mentoring such new youngsters.
What's the key advice that you would give the youngsters, the new bloods?
I think never lose hope and try till you succeed is the mantra. There's always something better which will show up.
Yeah. All right. Love it. Thank you so much for your time, doctor. We really appreciate your wisdom and your guidance in this area. Excited to see what you do next.
Thank you.